My childhood was very normal, very average. I wouldn't say I was particularly well off. And as a family, we were never particularly hard for money, but we were never rolling in it. I'd say I'd had a very loving childhood, a very normal family, normal upbringing, quite good morals, I suppose, quite good discipline, fairly average. School for me was always good, I suppose, on average. Primary school, I had lots of good friends. I was quite good at both maths and English, never really struggled much. And again in secondary school, I had a group of close friends. Fairly enjoyed school, I was good at quite a lot of subjects. There of course were ones that I wasn't good at, but on the whole I enjoyed it and I did well.
In the lead up to Hannah being ill, it was between her O-levels and her A-levels. So she just started her A-levels, and I don't think things were going very well. She did badly in a maths test at school and she hid it from me for about 6 weeks or so, which was out of character. She was also doing a lot of stuff. She was working at Pets at Home, she was doing scouts, choir, church stuff, loads of stuff. And eventually she did have a panic attack at school, and we weren't really sure what was going on. Then paramedics came, they told her to breathe more, didn't take her anywhere, that was it. Eventually she admitted to me that she thought she might be depressed, and that was the point where we said, well, maybe you need to stop doing so many activities. So we sort of came down a bit hard as parents and said, okay, you've got to stop doing this, this, this and this.
Where I'd always been quite successful at school, I'd always been quite good at my subjects and I did quite well in my GCSEs. I became a bit complacent with my studies, and I perhaps didn't realise what a commitment doing A-levels was and what a jump it was from GCSEs. So a lot of my extracurricular activities I kept going with. I was in scouts, I did singing, I did dancing, I did a lot of things, and I think I just got quite stressed. I suppose the scary thing about what happened to me was that I don't actually remember. I know I had a breakdown of sorts, I suppose, and I know that it was probably stress-induced. I'd had a particularly bad year where I'd been struggling, perhaps academically, and I wasn't used to struggling academically, so the fear of failure was creeping in as well. What actually happened on that day, as I said, I don't really remember, which is perhaps the scary thing. I know I became quite distressed. I know I was quite scared and I wanted to run away. I know that I was doing some damage to myself, and I know that I was very confused and upset and very, very anxious and stressed. I know I ended up in hospital.
When Hannah hurt herself or had her first sort of big episode, so it was a normal day, she went to school. I then got a call from the school about 10:30 saying would I come urgently. Hannah wasn't well, she was outside school and they needed me to come. I drove there in a matter of minutes. She was clearly very distressed. She was hyperventilating, she was dissociated with reality, with what was going on around her. And the teachers were sort of standing around, didn't know what to do, so they said, what do you want us to do? And I said, I don't know. I mean, I'd never been faced with this situation before, I didn't know, so I said, well, I'll call an ambulance. When the ambulance came, they said, we need to call the police. So the police came as well. Hannah was trying to run away, I think that's why. So we went to the local hospital. We were sent initially to a children's ward. She still wasn't really with us, and so she kept trying to escape or hurt herself, and there were sort of plenty of opportunities for her to do that on the ward, and we slept there with her, but we were having to control if she tried to run away in the middle of the night. We were having to try and deal with that, so it really wasn't ideal.
One of the difficulties is that you never really know anything. When a child is of a particular age, they're independent, but they're still your child, they're still you're under your care, but they have a degree of independence as far as doctors and medical staff are concerned. but it's also that degree of understanding what the situation is, what the problem is, what's going on. Nobody seems to, you don't know, you've got no history, you've got no background, it's just all new, and so it's just working it out one day at a time. So that's quite stressful, it's quite hard work, it's quite tiring. So when I say they were long, it was quite tiring, it just seemed to go on and on. And I guess unlike a physical condition, a broken leg, where you know that in 6 weeks' time the plaster will come off and there'll be a period of physiotherapy, it's not like that. You don't know what the end game is, you don't know what the end result might be.
When I got moved to the adolescent psychiatric unit, it was quite a scary thing. At the time I didn't really know what was happening. I certainly didn't understand that it was the best thing for me. I just knew that I was being separated from my family. I felt like it was a punishment. Looking back, I know it wasn't, and I know it helped me, but when I was in hospital I kept having these episodes, I suppose, these anxious, very stressful, very worrying, confused times in my life. I suppose they were like panic attacks, but perhaps a lot more severe. I had some psychosis. I used to hear things and see things and get very depressed and down. Naturally, I struggled and fell behind with my studies, whilst I had some good friends in hospital, and I really liked the staff and the nurses and the doctors, and I could tell that whilst I felt like I was being punished and I felt like I was in a prison, I knew that it was the best thing for me, I suppose, eventually. They were very caring, very understanding, always there to help you and facilitate whatever it was that was going to aid you in your recovery, and they were very good at responding on an individual basis. They weren't able to completely understand what was going on straight away, and it did take them some time to really kind of, I suppose, be able to help me, be able to give me the right medication and the right treatment, but I knew that they were there to help me. I think the nurses who saw me on a day-to-day basis, who were there to look after me every single day, every single moment, did more help for me than the doctors did, but in the end I came out of hospital without a proper diagnosis, which was difficult, and it certainly made life after hospital difficult. When I was in the unit, there were a lot of other young people, and they were all there for different reasons. Some of them had quite bad childhoods and upbringings, and were perhaps struggling from post-traumatic stress disorder or had been abused, and I felt quite bad that I was there perhaps going through some mental health problems, and I almost felt like I didn't have any reason to be there compared to them. I suppose we all knew that we all had one thing in common, and that was the fact that we were struggling with mental health problems, and regardless of the fact that they were all different, we all befriended each other and we all supported each other in the only way we knew how. Whilst we were all there for different reasons, we were all there and we were all apart from our family, and we did form a kind of, I suppose, like a secret support network. We were all there for each other. I had some particular friends who I felt, I suppose, understood me, and I understood them more than our parents did, more than our friends did, more than the staff did even. And that was, I suppose, was quite helpful. It was quite unhelpful at other times. I wouldn't say anyone had anything as bad as a suicide pact, but there were certainly times when actually we bounced off each other negatively with negative moods and things, but generally everyone there was lovely, was supportive. We were all there for different reasons, but we were all there to support each other too.
I think, looking back on it, the worst thing for me was when Hannah tried to hurt herself or even tried to kill herself. Because I think as a mother, you think, the one thing I've given you, out of everything I've given you, is life. I gave birth to you, and that seems to be the very thing you don't want now. So it was like the ultimate rejection, if you like, from a mother's point of view. And I think I could cope with anything that Hannah said, most of the things she did, But that was the one thing that really got to me.
I suppose my lowest point was about perhaps 2 months into my four-month stay. I got quite distressed and anxious on a daily basis, and sometimes twice a day. And it got to a point when I know I was having a lot of psychosis and a lot of suicidal thoughts and acts, and I did actually have to be sectioned in order so that I wouldn't hurt myself, and so that I wouldn't be able to leave the hospital, and so that people could keep a close eye on me. And I think looking back, that was my lowest point. I didn't realise it at the time, which is perhaps a blessing in disguise, but that was my lowest point.
The thing that most concerned me was just the not knowing. Nobody was really able to say, this is what the problem is, this is what the diagnosis is, and this is how we're going to fix it. And I guess unlike a physical issue, where it's much easier generally to say this is what is going to happen, something like a mental health issue is much more complex, and people don't really have a great understanding of some of what's going on. One copes. You get up in the morning and you go through the routine and you just cope. I don't think we really gave enough credit to what was going on under the surface to her younger sister. Always there in times of need and trouble and difficult moments. She was always there. Saw the good things, saw the bad things. But I don't think we really, whilst we could talk about it, some of our struggles, I don't think we ever really unpacked it and discussed it with her younger sister.
People did keep asking us though. They kept saying, how is this affecting her sister? And I didn't really have an answer for the question, because what she tended to do was she withdrew, I think, within herself, and she became quite self-sufficient. I mean, there's the example of one time when Hannah was hurting herself at home, and she knew that Hannah needed an ambulance, and she also knew that we needed the police. So she very calmly called the ambulance, then called the police. She was 14 at this time, and looking back, that feels like a lot of responsibility for a 14-year-old. When we went to the GP, it was a bit of a difficult situation, because it's like they have a checklist. When somebody comes in and says they're depressed, there seems to be a standard list of questions that they ask. And I was not involved in the conversation. Hannah was it was like a one-on-one with the doctor, and I was just sat in the corner. And he said to her, had she ever thought of hurting herself or harming herself? And her answer was, yes, I've thought about it, but I haven't done anything about it. And that was difficult for me, because that was the first time I'd heard that. That was new information. So I had to really keep a lid on how I felt, because I don't think I'd realised how Hannah felt. I didn't think I'd realised she felt that bad. And he didn't really do anything for her. He didn't really suggest anything or refer her anywhere. And it wasn't long, it was probably within 4 or 5 days of that Hannah really had her first big episode where she tried to hurt herself. We saw the sort of head doctor of the practice, and we had a meeting about it, and he said if we did something every time somebody said they were going to hurt themselves, we would be overrun, we wouldn't be able to cope, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, well, yes, but from a 17-year-old girl who's never said this before, and this is the first time she's presented with this, I felt as if she should have been taken more seriously, and clearly she should have been taken more seriously. It seemed to me like that's a flaw in the system.
With school, I mean, my teachers that I had before and during when I was ill, they tried to be helpful, I suppose. They weren't particularly. They were sort of made out they were being helpful from a distance. There were a couple of teachers, not who were senior leadership teachers, but there were a couple of sort of, my form tutor, she was probably the most helpful, particularly when I came out of hospital and they tried to reintegrate me back into school life. They tried to be helpful, and I suppose they were to a certain extent. Academically, I didn't really get much support, and to me that was a big thing, because I'd always been quite an academic high achiever, and to me it was a big thing to keep going with that academic stuff and to keep doing well in my exams and subjects, and I didn't really get much support through that, which was difficult for me, because I suppose that didn't really make things better for me. Looking back on it, I know that there perhaps wasn't much more they could have done. It was perhaps quite a difficult situation for them, and I don't think they were very well prepared. I was seeing a school counsellor before this all happened. I could tell that I was getting a bit stressed, but that didn't really help. I don't think she dealt with the things that needed to be dealt with.
The school were they tried to be involved, but it was a little bit lacklustre. It felt to me as if it was a little bit outside of their ability to cope. And they really, once Hannah went to the psychiatric unit, the teenage psychiatric unit, they really didn't, they were quite hands-off. They tried to do what they could, but it very much felt as if it's not really our problem now. I think they turned up at one multidisciplinary meeting, but they didn't turn up at others. I don't know, what's your memory?
I don't think schools are in a place to be as supportive of, particularly secondary schools maybe. I don't think that's I don't think they feel that's their responsibility. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. Whether that's the pressure of schools these days.
My friends' reactions to everything that happened were really divided. I think I learnt who my real friends were, and they were the ones that stuck with me. There are definitely people that I was friends with before this all happened who I haven't spoken to or heard from since. But then there were other friends, one particular girl who wrote to me the whole time I was in hospital, and I used to write back to her when I could, but that was really nice because it showed that she was really concerned about me and really wanted to stay friends with me. And there was another girl who I was actually allowed to come home at weekends sometimes, come home from hospital at weekends, and she was really lovely because she used to come and see me. If I was well enough, she would come and see me and just do really simple things. She used to come and sit with me when my mum was out, just to kind of make sure that I was okay, I suppose. And that was really lovely. She was really lovely and showed genuine concern and used to ask my mum and dad how I was. There are other people who I am really good friends with now, who I was friends with before, who I didn't really speak to much during the time that I was ill, and I suppose that's completely understandable. I guess they were scared. They didn't really know what to do to help. They didn't really know what to do for the best, what to say, or how to speak to me, and that was difficult because I didn't want them to feel like that. I didn't want them to feel like they couldn't speak to me or didn't know what to say. It was just difficult, but like I said, there are definitely people who clearly weren't ever good friends because I don't see them or speak to them now and haven't done since I became ill. I came home and I was absolutely desperate to come home. I was desperate to leave. I felt like I was back to normal, how I was before, and looking back, I know I wasn't quite right, but I had gone through a period of about 5 or 6 weeks of being absolutely on top of the world and feeling on top of the world, feeling like I was having such a positive recovery. When I came back out, it was okay, it was good, and I was starting to fit back into school and my friends, and I felt like I was starting to fit back into family life. Looking back, I can see that was a very long process. It took me a long time to really learn how to deal with these episodes that I have without the aid of nurses and medication, emergency medication. It took a long time both for me and for my family and my support network to know how to deal with all of that. it took a long time for me to be able to slot back into many different activities. I started at a new school in the following September, which was actually quite a good thing for me. It gave me a fresh start in some respects. It was difficult to be able to explain to people because I was still having quite a lot of anxiety and depression. It was difficult to be able to explain to people how to deal with that. But I think that did help me in the long run.
The mental health team for children, the CAMS mental health team, were quite involved with Hannah, but really I think we felt as if we'd been left a bit high and dry. She left the teenage unit because she was a voluntary patient. She left, I think, perhaps a bit before she was ready, which meant we had to deal with stuff when she came out. I remember one particular instant when she ended up in A&E, and the next day, they kept her in overnight. The next day, the CAMS doctor and assistant came out to talk to her, and they sat with Hannah for 45 minutes and asked her how she was feeling and why she'd done it and blah, 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 blah. And we had to sit outside. We weren't allowed in. And then they gave us about 10 minutes with Hannah to say what we felt. And we very much felt in that time that we were being demonised. Hannah had perhaps said things about us, which had led them to have the opinion that we were the problem. And then we felt as if we were sort of in the wrong somehow, or, that felt very difficult. I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that one of the situations these days is that we have a system which is for the rights of an individual, which doesn't really support the needs of the family to support that individual. And so you have a conflict of interest with professional services, which is not really a holistic approach in the way that a family might need that support. It's very much centred around the needs of looking after the patient and not necessarily towards helping the family to engage with the patient at that particular level.
Since I left hospital, I've had my ups and downs, don't get me wrong. There's been moments that have been quite difficult. I've certainly had episodes, as has been described. But I've had happy moments. I've had times where CBT or art therapy or medication has worked for me, and I've had times that have been really positive and have been normal. It's still not 100%, but I am where I am today. I'm about to graduate from university, I'm about to get married, I'm about to start a whole new part of my life. So there aren't always things that work, but there are things that do. It's always going to be up and down. Perhaps one day it will just be up.
Hindsight's always a very good thing, but it's something you never really know that. I think the nature of mental health is that it's a buried issue. It's not openly discussed. It's not openly, it's not openly discussed. So I think when it comes into your life in whatever form, whether it's a family member or a friend, it opens all sorts of questions that you haven't really had the opportunity to think about before. So I don't think there's anything that can really truly prepare you for some of those situations that you have to think about and face when you get there. I think one of the issues now is that we have a society where we want everything to be fixed, and that doesn't matter what it is. Everything can be fixed, everything can be solved, everything can be understood. And so I think one of the pieces of advice I would perhaps say to others going through a similar experience is that they have to be honest about the situation. They have to be very real about their own emotions, the emotions of those in their family unit, and those around them. And when it's going well, it's going well, and when it isn't, it isn't. And I think that's part of the situation is being honest. So I would encourage that in parents and other teenagers in a similar situation, because once you can be honest and talk about what's happening, then you're halfway to moving on in whatever way that means.
And I think because there wasn't a huge amount of support for us as parents, we were completely confused about how we should respond to it, and so we were making it up as we went along, and maybe we didn't do that very well. I'd be more prepared for it now, but because we didn't know, it was an unknown thing. So, I don't know, maybe more information for parents.
Like my dad said, I think it is to be honest, whether that is to your parents, to your teachers, to your friends, or to a complete stranger, if that's what it needs to be, but you need to be honest. You need to deal with it head on. It's not going to be fun, it's not going to be easy, it's going to be quite a difficult ride, and you might end up testing a lot of your close relationships, but actually the only way to deal with it is to speak up about it to whoever you can. Rely on the people that are close by to you, but appreciate them also when you can, because they will do a lot for you.